I've had all these odd experiences off and on through my life. I've had some others as well. But because of this, I developed this interest in all things that were kind of strange and unusual and unknown, paranormal or cryptozoological or ancient, hidden history type of things I've found very interesting, And I met a guy in my neighborhood. Our kids were friends. So, that's how you meet a lot of people when you have young kids, is that you meet them through the kids. So he had similar interests as me in this weird stuff. And he suggested we start a podcast. So this is around 2007, about 15 years ago. And I was like, okay. So we set this up in his basement, and we've got a cheap mixing board, and we started doing a weekly podcast down in his basement. And we were always on the lookout for new guests. And I had read about this guy who sounded to me very interesting. He had a book out, and I purchased it and read it. And I was like, well, maybe we can book him. So I contacted the publisher of this guy's book, and he gave me his contact information. We had interviewed actually this publisher's, several of his other authors as well. So we got to know him a little bit. Very nice man. And so I got in touch with this guy. His name is Adam Davies, and he's a well-known cryptozoologist. He's been all over the world looking for all kinds of strange creatures. I guess his most notable work is he's been with the orang pendek. He's been in Sumatra many times looking for this evidence of this hominid, I guess, primate, upright walking hominid, or hominoid is, I think, is the proper word. And, he's gathered some pretty strong evidence. He's been on a lot of television shows. He was with the Finding Bigfoot guys out when they went to Sumatra. And Adam and I, he was a great interview. We had a really good time on the interview. We used to like to joke around a bit, and he has a good sense of humor. We had him back several times on the podcast. And once the podcast ended, we did it for about 1.5 to 2 years. And then one of the guys moved away, and he got divorced and moved away. And I took the podcasting equipment, and it sort of went by the wayside. But Adam and I kept in touch, and we used to Skype regularly. And he lived in England at the time. And we used to do Skype chat every couple of weeks, catch up and email each other. And then he began getting interested in Bigfoot around 2012. And he went for his first expedition with several friends of his who were also researchers from England. One of the guys was from the Netherlands, and they all went out to the Cascades in Washington to do the Bigfoot expedition. And they went to look for gather evidence. And he said, hey, we're planning on stopping over and staying in New York City for a few days. Do you think you could meet us? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. I would love to, because up until then, we had never really met face to face. We had just Skyped and emailed and such. So social media. And I said, great. Yeah, I would love to. So I hopped on the bus. It's only about a straight bus ride with no stops. Is about 20 minutes to get into Manhattan from my house. So I went into the city, stayed in there for a couple of days, and 2-3 days, and hung out with Adam and his friends from England and Netherlands, and had a great time, and really nice bunch of people. And Adam said, hey, next time we go on an expedition, you should come with us. And I said, oh, okay. I said, that sounds good. I've never really done anything like that. I mean, I've done the podcast. I've talked about this stuff. I've written some blog articles about it, but I've never actually gone out in the field and done any sort of real research. I'm not like a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator or anything like that. So we talked about this for a while, went back and forth, and Adam said, okay, I may have some plans coming up in June of 2014. And he said, I'm going to Washington State and then to Oregon. And it'd be about 9 days. I said, okay. I said, that sounds good. I was like, I'm in. So, checked with my wife, and she said, that's fine. You go ahead. And she'd actually ended up a month later going to Italy for 2.5 weeks with her mom to visit her uncle. So it all worked out. We kind of took our separate vacations that year. And so I met Adam out in Washington at the airport, at the Seattle Tacoma airport in Seattle. And it was kind of late. My luggage came in later, so we crashed overnight at a hotel. And then the next morning, we drove up to the Olympic Peninsula to Port Angeles, Washington, which is a good 2 or 3 hour drive, beautiful drive up from Seattle, up the Olympic Peninsula. And never been out to that part of the country before. And so I was excited to get away. I was kind of having a hard time. I had a lot of personal and professional problems sort of all coming to a head. And I was sort of not in the best frame of mind. And I was like, you know what? This is what I need. I said, this is going to be a lot of fun just to get away and hang out and hike and camp with my friend. And that was really all I was expecting. I wasn't expecting anything more than that. All I was really looking for is just to get away and spend some time with my friend and enjoy myself. So I said, as far as all the Bigfoot stuff, I was like, that's great. If we find some evidence of that these things exist, if anything happens that's conclusive, I think that would be wonderful, but I'm not really I had no expectations. This is what I'm saying. I was like, I came in with an open mind. I'm not a skeptic, but I was not really thinking anything really was going to happen. And I thought if it did, fantastic. If not, go have a good time. So we went up to Port Angeles. We met a group of other Bigfooters on the property of a gentleman named Derek Randalls, and he runs the Olympic Project along with a few other people, but I think they usually hold it on his property there, which is right along near the Olympic Trail, which is basically kind of almost in his backyard. And a bunch of notable Bigfoot researchers were there. And then Dr. Jeff Meldrum, he was there and gave a talk. And David Ellis did a really good talk on sound analysis, vocalization analyses, and a lot of nice folks. Never met them before, and they were all Bigfoot researchers and enthusiasts. Was not and really am not part of that community, but the folks I met were real nice. We kind of had an interesting experience on our very first night. We broke up into two groups, and we went out in separate directions and did a little night hike, kind of seeing what we could see. And then we heard of some very interesting vocalizations. And so some movement on this ridge up above to our left off the side of the trail. And then we heard an answering vocalization from further down the road, which was a slightly higher pitch. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, I wonder if that sounds almost like maybe a female. I was a new guy, so I wasn't saying anything. So I was keeping my mouth shut and just kind of going along. And then one of the other researchers there said, oh, that sounds like a female. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So I felt sort of validated, but again, I was like, these were mostly pretty experienced researchers. I was just kind of being quiet and keep my mouth shut. And we hiked around, and eventually there wasn't anything really further. And we went back to the camp. And the next day I slept in a little bit, and everybody else had gotten up and was out and about. And I decided to just walk on my own up the trail. And the Olympic Trail, I think it's about 160 miles or more end to end. And it's nice and wide and paved. But it's all really dense woods on either side. And I was like, it's a beautiful, beautiful day. The weather was perfect the whole 9 days that we were out there. Like not a cloud in the sky, nice and warm, pretty hot, but low humidity. And I figured, I'd have drank a little bit too much whiskey the night before and had a bit of a hangover. I was like, I'm just going to go and walk this off a little bit and clear my head and soak in the sights. Adam was out looking for some, hair samples and such with some of the group that went out with us the night before. So I was walking up the trail, and a good hour. And at first I saw somebody go by on a bicycle, and then I saw a jogger go by. And then after that, I didn't see anybody for a good hour. It was just quiet. And just the sound of the animals. And I was really enjoying myself. And I suddenly got hit with this very strong feeling that I should turn around and leave. And it really hit me out of nowhere because I was just enjoying myself and I was going to walk another 20 or 30 minutes before I turned around because I didn't want to miss the whole day. I don't want to be away from camp too long. And so I figured I'd walk another 20, 30 minutes and turn around and head back. But I got hit with this sudden, very strong feeling that I better turn around right now. So that was strange. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to listen to this impression that I'm getting here because it seems like it would be bad if I kept going forward. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think I better obey whatever this is and turn around. So I turned around. So that was weird. That was quite strange. Make of it what you will. I'm not really sure, but I don't know if that was just, I don't feel like it was me just getting spooked or giving myself the creeps. It seemed almost like a thought directed into my mind, like turn around now. So I did. I went back to camp and that was that. That was the end of my hiking. And then the next day we did a little more research, a little more traipsing into the woods and looking for evidence and such. And then we left a day early. I think we stayed 2 nights, and on the third day we left. This was again the month of June. To say we got there on the 9th, I think, of June, and this is 2014. Well, whatever the date it was that, I think, that Monday. It was a Monday. We got there on a Saturday. We left Monday, and Adam had made arrangements to meet this other Bigfoot researcher in the Seattle area. He lived right outside of Seattle. So we drove down to Seattle. We met with him. We spent the night at his house. And the next day, the plan was that he was going to drive us down to this area that he's been researching for. He'd been going there for almost 9 years. And this was in southern Oregon. So it was about an 8-hour drive. And we hopped in the car, Adam and I, and this gentleman and his little dog, and the three of us drove down. He had a big old Ford Suburban, and we drove down there. Beautiful weather again, and as it was every day we were there. And we were enjoying the sights on the way, and we get there and we drive through this nice little town called Grants Pass. I think this is maybe about 70 miles from the California border, and we stopped, got something to eat, and then we drove to the outskirts of the town. And fortunately, we were able to leave our rental car back up at his driveway because, as we were to soon find out, it was not an area we would have wanted to drive the rental car through. So we drove to the outskirts of the town, and this gentleman was doing the driving, and Adam was in the front seat, and I was in the back with the gear. And we found some little side roads and led us to sort of a dirt road. And then we found this old logging road. It was an old abandoned logging road. And it was about 10, 11 miles up this old road. And it climbed up pretty steeply, and it was unused and very, very bumpy, and a lot of big pits and ruts and potholes. And it was very overgrown too. There was a lot of parts where it was just like going through a tunnel of vegetation, and the branches of the bushes and the trees were just scraping along the car. So that's why I was glad that we didn't have to bring our rental car, because it would have gotten all really badly scratched. I'm just sure the rental car people would have charged us for that. So we're driving through, and we actually had to pull in his side view mirrors a few times so they didn't get torn off. I mean, it was that, just to give you a sense of how unused and overgrown and rough this road was. And on one side, like on the passenger side, a bunch of times, like the edge of the tire was like right at the edge of the road, within a couple of feet, it just dropped off really steeply. So it was a mountain ridge we were going up, and we were like right on the spine of the ridge. And after about 10, 11 miles of this bumping up and down and going through up this terrible road, it came to like a little circular, like turnaround area for vehicles, and it dead ends there. And that's where we parked. And the road didn't go any further, just dead ended in this little circular area. And we unloaded his truck and we set up our camp and just kind of settled in for the weekend. He explained to us that there were the Bigfoot in the area, or he preferred to call them forest people. He said they prefer us to sleep outside. He said if we sleep inside a tent or inside a vehicle, they will ping the tent or inside the car, the SUV. So they will ping it with pebbles all night. So we said, okay. We were following this guy's lead. I mean, he'd been staking this place out like 2-3 weekends out of the month, year round for about 9 years. So he'd been there many, many, many times. And he had certain rules and protocols that he asked us to follow, and we did so, no questions. So we set up, he had cots for us and sleeping bags, and he had all the gear. We slept outdoors for those 4 nights, and we were there 5 days, 4 nights. And we set up a big table where he did these. We had some of our gear on the tables, the folding tables, and he explained to us, okay, the first night, it's in the evening when these things become active. He said, typically the first night, when I bring people here, he said the first night, they're quiet because they're kind of checking us out from afar. They don't want to get too close. Adam and I said, okay, makes sense, fine. And he said the second night, it usually gets busier. And that's precisely what happened. The first night was pretty uneventful. And on the second night, we began to hear a lot of noise, like heavy, heavy footsteps, cracking branches, hooting, kind of strange vocalization sounds, anything that sounded like animals at all. They sounded kind of human or primate-like. And there was definitely a sense of motion around us, but we had no real clear sighting of anything. Now, on the second and on the third night, I saw kind of a fleeting, tall, dark, it's just a silhouetted figure moving between the trees. It happened very fast, but I saw it 2 times. And the turnaround area, as I said, it was a circle. And one of the rules that this gentleman had was that he said the Bigfoot don't like it if you point. Besides not sleeping in tents or inside the SUV, one of the other rules was no pointing because they might take it as a sign of aggression or something. So he said, if you need to call attention to, if you see something, think of the circle as the face of a clock. He said, if you hear something, so the entrance into the circular camp area would be the 6 o'clock position. Straight ahead would be the 12 o'clock position. And at that 12 o'clock position, actually, there was a little footpath that climbed through the woods and then up higher up onto the ridge. And to the right, like the 3 o'clock position, there was dense bushes and trees, but you can only hike in a few yards, and then it fell off real steeply. Because, like I said, it was up on a mountain ridge. To the left, the woods were deeper. You could hike in further. And it was to the left where, now it was actually a full moon on the last night that we were there. So the moon was waxing. There was no humidity whatsoever. So it was very, very clear skies. Even though it was black up there, I mean, it was above the city, the town of Grants Pass, and there was no light pollution at all. But there was the moonlight, which illuminated things a lot. And so it wasn't like you couldn't see your hand in front of you. But the woods were dark. You couldn't really see into the woods. I mean, even with the moonlight, it was pretty dark. But the woods to the left, like the 9 o'clock position area, the trees were sort of backlit by the moon as it was rising. The moon was to the left, and kind of behind the trees, the trees were sort of backlit. And it was between these trees that I saw figures moving a couple times. Now, I was describing this, well, actually, jumping ahead a little bit. My friend Adam ended up going back to this place because he moved to the West Coast. And he went back there with a gentleman I think you might have just interviewed, Dan Lindholm. And Dan was telling me how he saw these black silhouettes moving between. He went there because he lives in the area. And he's been there, went there with Adam and some other guys. And he went there. He's been then over there on his own, I believe. on a number of occasions, and he's described the same thing that I saw, which I thought was very interesting. He said he saw these black silhouettes moving through those trees on the left because the trees were sort of backlit by the moon, and I was like, that is precisely what I saw. So it was kind of nice. It was sort of, all this stuff is so strange, Vic. It's very easy to second guess yourself and to think, well, did I really see that? Or so it's kind of nice to hear somebody else say, he said it first. He didn't even know about me having seen the same thing. I was like, that is precisely what I saw too. So I think we were both kind of made us feel a little bit better to have some corroboration with each other. But other than those fleeting silhouettes between the trees, these tall, dark figures, there was no visual sightings of any Bigfoot. I did see a large, wide footprint, appeared to be a bare footprint. I have a picture of it. It almost looks as if it's three-toed, honestly, but it's not quite defined enough that I could tell for sure. But it sort of looks like as if it's three-toed. And I have read that. So the Fouke, Arkansas sightings, a lot of those are described as being three-toed prints. So it's not without precedent, I guess, seeing those three-toed prints. And also we put out these gifting bowls, and they were big stainless steel dog food bowls. And we would put out 2 of them each night. This is all according to the gentleman who brought us there, had a strict kind of methodology. And he would put one that had more like fruits and vegetables. The other stuff had like kind of sticky, bready stuff, like Fig Newtons and sticky buns and Cheetos and more like junk food. And we would put out these gifting bowls. Well, and he was always very, very careful to show us how he prepared them. And he would wear rubber gloves so as to not leave any fingerprints. And he actually had me carry them a few times in and put them down into the woods. It was kind of up that trail at the 12 o'clock position in those woods ahead of us. And one morning we went to gather to see what was taken from the bowls. And there were very, very large finger and thumbprints on the sides of the stainless steel bowls. So that was interesting. I mean, they were too big to come from a normal sized human hand. And they were clearly finger and thumbprints, as if somebody grabbed the inside of the bowl, kind of pinched it between the inside and outside of the bowl and picked it up. And they were big. But as far as physical evidence, that was it. The prints and the big single footprint I saw that kind of looked three-toed to me. and those fleeting silhouettes. But other than that, no definitive, clear Bigfoot sighting, but just a lot of cracking branches and movement and noise around us, but nothing clear, nothing definitive, I suppose. But certainly we had this impression that we were more or less surrounded by something walking around us that seemed large and bipedal. So those first 2 nights, first night we were pretty tired, and I think we stayed up maybe till 1. And then the second night, a little later, maybe 1:30. And the third night, and all this occurred at night. During the daytime, we went out down off the mountain and did some fun daytime activities in the area. We went to the House of Mystery in Oregon, which was pretty neat. And we went jet boat riding one day, and we did some pretty fun activities during the daytime, sightseeing, things like that. But at night was when we would do the Bigfoot research stuff. And we basically would sort of walk around the perimeter of the circle, and we would kind of call out and say, hello, my name is John, my name is Adam. Hello, thank you for having us here. I felt a little silly doing it, but that's what we were doing and trying to elicit some sort of response. And this went on for the first 2 nights. And like I said, the second night, a lot of noise, a lot of activity, but no clear sighting. Third night, same thing, a lot of noise, a lot of activity, cracking branches, vocalizations, noises, hooting, primate sounding kind of hoots, but again, no clear visual of anything. The third night, we were feeling a little bit more awake, a little more rejuvenated, having kind of settled in, and we stayed up a little bit later. And it was, during the day and during our daytime travels, I picked up a pack of backwoods cigars, and they're cheap cigars, kind of hand-rolled cigars that come in this little pouch. if you've never seen them before or heard of them, but I'm not a smoker. But when I go camping, I like to puff on these cheap cigars, and they're kind of nice and they're mild and they keep away bugs too, which is good when you're camping. So I'm puffing on these cigars, and Adam had never, being from England, I guess they don't have them there. So I said, here, try it. He tried it out, and he really liked them. So I ended up picking up some more packs the next day when we were out. And the two of us were standing by the entrance. Now, the other guy, the gentleman who brought us there, said, I don't like smoking and I have asthma. And if you guys are going to smoke, go do it back by the entrance at the 6 o'clock position where the logging road goes into the turnaround camping area. And we said, sure, fine. So we would stand at the entrance of the road, sort of looking down the road that leads into the camp. And this is the weird part. This is where the fun starts. We're looking down the road, and we were taking these breaks. We weren't back there all night. I've heard this guy say that we were just hanging out there all night long. We really were not. Every 45 minutes or every hour or so, we would take a smoke break and puff on our cigars and kind of just chat, the two of us, Adam and I, and we would look down the road and to sort of puff our cigar smoke in that direction instead of in toward the campsite where it would aggravate the other guy. So about 2:30 a.m., we're still going strong. And the other guy's still walking around the camp, calling out, and he would play music. That was the other thing. He had a boom box there, and he would play kind of soothing music for them. He said they liked that. So I said, oh, okay. So he was, again, trying to elicit some response from these forest people. And Adam and I were taking a smoke break, and we were looking down the road, facing that direction, sort of our back to him and to the camp. I noticed it, and then we were both looking in the same direction. I think we both probably noticed around the same time. There was a glowing mist. It was maybe 100 feet up the road, if that. I think at one point I said it was 150 feet, but I don't think it was that far. And upon reflection, I think it was maybe 75 to 100 feet up the road. Probably not much more if it was more than 100, but it was a mist, kind of hung just above the road. And it was about the width of the road. So I don't know, what's that, 6 or 8 feet? It was a fairly narrow road. And it was a dirt road, I probably mentioned. It was unpaved. So I'm thinking to myself, I was like, that's kind of odd that there's a mist since there's like this zero humidity up in this place. I mean, really, like, it had to have been upper 90s during the daytime, but you hardly even felt it because there was just no humidity during the day or at night, which, being from the East Coast, I'm not too used to. It's pretty humid around here. And so I thought it was odd that there would be a mist since the humidity was basically zilch. And it was glowing, and I thought, well, the moon is almost full. And I think the next night it was a full moon. And I was like, I guess it's the moonlight reflecting off the mist, which is why it appeared to be sort of glowing. So that's what I thought at first, and I'm looking at it, except the mist kept glowing brighter. And again, it was maybe the width of the road. It hung just above the ground. And it was, I don't know, 6, 8 feet high. I don't know. Wider than it was high, I think. Roughly oblong in shape. No clearly defined edges. Like a mist, except it seemed to be getting a little bit bigger and brighter. And Adam looks at me. I don't know who said it first, but we're like, ooh, what is that? He might have said it to me, and I said, I don't know. I was like, I thought it was just some sort of ground mist, but it's getting brighter. And he goes, yeah. He goes, it's like glowing. So I'm like, that's really weird. And it kept glowing steadily brighter. So we turned around and we called to the other guy, and he came over and he goes, what's up? And I said, well, and we're like, what is that? And he said, I don't know. I've never seen that before. And this guy had confided in us. He had seen some strange stuff up that way. There were other things apparently that happened up there besides Bigfoot activity, which I didn't know about. But we're watching it. The three of us now are staring at this glowing mist, and it starts to glow red in the middle. It becomes this kind of fiery orange red. So this kind of circular area in the middle forms, this red circular area, and it sort of becomes translucent, like we're looking into a different landscape. And I could see this rocky, barren looking world with this twisted, gnarled, dead tree in it. And all three of us saw this and all described it the same. So this wasn't just like my individual impression. We were all seeing and describing these phenomena the same. Oh, and besides that, as this mist was kind of glowing brighter and brighter, and as this red center began to form, there were these orbs of light that seemed to sort of come off of it, round balls of light. Some of them sort of popped like old-fashioned flash bulbs, like off and on, and some kind of zipped off into the trees, and one sort of shot in sort of an arc over the road. And so there was that aspect. Then this window opened up, this red fiery window. It looked into some landscape that was bathed in this red orange glow, and it was rocky, and it was definitely weren't looking through it into the road, because the road was just kind of just flat and there were bushes on either side. This was some sort of landscape that was alien looking and barren and rocky. And again, there was this twisted, gnarled tree inside of it. And then we see these two short, squat, humanoid looking figures, and they walk out of this portal, if you want to use that word. This happened 8 years ago, almost. So the story's gotten a little bit of circulation, and it's sort of been referred to as the Bigfoot portal story. But so that's why I'm a little hesitant to use the word portal. I don't know. I guess it's as good a word as any. It's a gateway, or whatever you want to call it, doorway into whatever this other place was. But no Bigfoots came out of it. So it's not really a Bigfoot story per se. The things that walked out of it were short, and they were black, and they had glowing red eyes, kind of like hot coals, like fiery red. And they were entirely black, and they were 3.5 feet tall. They were humanoid in that they had 2 arms and 2 legs, but they were very powerfully built, very strong looking. Not much of a neck, kind of a flattish face. And they walk forward out of this thing and up towards the road a little ways, and then they stopped. But this kind of reddish glow still sort of surrounded them as they were walking. It was really strange. They started walking up towards the road, and then they stopped, and they were looking at us, sort of feel like they were sort of sizing us up. And Adam and I both got the impression they were sort of surprised to see us. They didn't expect, I don't know, maybe they thought we would be asleep. We were up later than usual, which led me to think, I was like, I sure hope these things weren't here the first 2 nights that we were up there, because this was the 3rd night, and we hadn't seen them the first 2 nights, but we went to bed earlier those first 2 nights. This was at 2:30 a.m., and there they were. And we both had a very distinct feeling that they wanted us to go to sleep. Again, it wasn't quite a voice that we heard, but it was a very, very distinct impression of go to your cots, go to sleep. And Adam and I both sensed that. So they started to move up the road, and we took out our flashlights. And that was another thing. We weren't supposed to have flashlights up at this place. That was one of the rules that we were supposed to follow. There was no fires up there. All the meals that we had, we got in town in fast food places during our daytime travels, but there was no fires and there was no flashlights. But we had flashlights with us, but they were in our packs. So we got our flashlights out, and as these things started to move towards us, we turned our flashlights on toward them in the direction of that portal, that mist with the red center, and everything it winked out. It just disappeared as soon as we hit the light on it. It was really just like flipping a light switch. It just went out, and it appeared that they were gone, at least for the time being. And the gentleman who took us to this place walked down the road, and he had a handgun with him, which he kept in his glove box, which he, I think, wisely took out. And he went down there with his flashlight and his handgun, and he said, "You are not welcome here. Leave. Do us no harm," or something to that effect. "You are not welcome here." And he walked up to the road to where the point where the mist had appeared. And there's no sign of him, but he walked back. And then at that point, when he was down there, his son came up for a couple of days. His kid saw these things and he got scared. And his father took him back to his cot and said, to kind of calmed him. So this mist reappeared. It started to reform. It started to get brighter again and got brighter and brighter. Again, that red center area appeared again. It appeared to be some sort of window into another, whatever, dimension and another world. And out came those two things again, short, squat, black things, glowing red eyes, and started to come up the road toward us. That would stop, get a little closer, kind of stop, check us out. Didn't come right at us. They were definitely seemed to be wary of us, but I don't know. They were, I guess, within 30 or 40 feet, and they were close enough. And then we would turn the flashlight on them again. Again, they would just disappear. And this kind of stuff sounds kind of silly, and people are like, "Oh, well, it's probably a movie projector or some sort of hologram." I've heard that from a bunch of people. "Oh, it was somebody projecting a hologram." I'm like, "Oh." It was dead silent up in those woods. There's nobody up there. I don't know how anybody would have pulled off some high-tech hoax on us. And these things actually got very close to us, which I'll get to in a sec. But we saw them quite clearly. So the other guy gets back, he gets his son to sleep, and he goes, "You know what? You guys can stay up all night staring at these things if you want," but he goes, "I'm tired, I'm going to bed." And Adam and I are like, "You can sleep with those things that are right outside our camp?" And he goes, "I don't." He goes, "I'm tired, I need to get to sleep. I'm not staying up all night." And I'm like, okay. But, the guy had been up there, like I said, probably at least 100 times every year for 9 years or something like that, So, I figure 50 times a year at least, something like that. I bet he'd been into that place for like 500 times. So, and nothing bad had ever befallen him. And his rationale was, well, nothing here has ever harmed me, so I assume that these things aren't going to do me any harm. And I'm tired, I'm going to go to bed. So we're like, okay. So he climbed in his cot and he fell right to sleep. I'm like, well, Adam and I are like, no way. We are not going to sleep with those things right outside. And they obviously seem to want to enter our camp. And we felt sort of like we were keeping them at bay. So we decided that we were going to stay up all night. And once again, the mist reformed, the red center started again, and these things started to walk up the road toward us. And this time, they had gotten closer to us, and I could really see what they looked like. As I said, they were short, 3.5 meter tall. They were black. They had glowing eyes, red eyes. They were very robustly built. I had a flat face. I'm like, I know I've been talking for a while, but earlier, the beginning of this, I described those things that I used to see in my room at night. These things were identical. Could have been a coincidence, I guess, that they happened to look just like them, but these looked like the things that I saw as a child over and over and over when I lived in that house in Massachusetts. I mean, precisely like those things. And it dawned on me, I'm like, these are the same things I used to see as a child. To this day, that's messed with my head, honestly. I don't know what that means. I mean, I have my theories, but these are the same things I saw as a kid. And I suddenly realized it. Initially, I felt a sense of panic. I've said this before, but I would imagine it's the sort of feeling that one might have if they were abused as a child and met their abuser as an adult. It was initially a feeling of shock and fear, and then it became very quickly anger. I got mad. So Adam and I are standing at the entrance of the camp at the 6 o'clock position. And these things had advanced close enough to us that, I got a good look at them. And I realized these are the same things that I saw as a child. And I got angry and I started to march up the road directly at them because I wanted to punch them and I wanted to fight. Stupid, but that's how I get when I get mad. And I don't usually get that angry that easily, but pretty calm guy for the most part. But I was walking toward them and I was yelling at them. I was screaming at them. I said, I know you guys. I know who you are. And I know what you are. I can't remember specifically, but I was like, I know you're the same things that used to torture me when I was a kid. And I'm a grown man and you're not going to do that to me again. And we're not going to go to sleep. We're not going to do what you want. We're not going to go to sleep. We're going to stay up all night. We're not going to let you do what you want to do to us. And as I'm screaming all this at them, I'm marching up the road directly at them. And I was getting close. I mean, I was kind of halfway between them and the entrance of the camp where Adam was standing. And Adam yells, John, he goes, get back here. He goes, don't get any closer to those things. And the sound of his voice snapped me out of it. And I turned around and there's Adam. He's like waving at me. It's like, get back here. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And I quickly backed up and stood next to him. And he goes, don't get near those things. You might get sucked into that portal or those things might grab you. Or he goes, just stay back here. And I said, yeah, you're right. Thanks. I was like, he prevented me from doing something that could have really ended badly. So thanks again to Adam Davies. So we sat in the chairs, and for the time being, like the mist wasn't, that was another thing. It almost seemed like this mist from which they were entering or exiting from into our dimension, or however you want to say it, almost seemed mechanical in a way. It seemed as it took a little while to power back. It's almost like it powered up, like some sort of mechanical apparatus. It just would get gradually brighter, and then the red part would form and the things would come out, almost like something that was a mechanical thing in nature. But anyway, it seemed like it was taking a little bit longer. We had a few minutes to sit and sort of compose ourselves. Another thing, as we were sitting there talking and trying to calm down, the trees above us, the first night, I think we saw a lights like flashing, like illuminating the treetops. And then again, that there was the treetops were suddenly just bathed in light. And it didn't look as if it was a beam of light, like a spotlight or a flashlight. Someone was pointing at it. It was just suddenly illuminated. And then it went out. And then it went back on. And it did this a few times, which was another just strange anomaly. I heard another Bigfoot researcher in a video describe this exactly. It was actually Bobo from Finding Bigfoot, Bobo Fay. The way he described it was precisely what Adam and I saw up in Oregon. And I was like, wow, okay. So again, first I had Dan Lindholm who saw the silhouettes, and then I heard Bobo saying that that this light up in the trees, the way he described it, is exactly what we saw, which we just thought it was very strange. I mean, wasn't especially frightening. It was just weird. It was just one more strange thing that happened up there. And speaking of things flashing out when the flashlights turned on them, I heard, because I listen to this stuff now, and somebody saw some sort of, I don't know, it was a Bigfoot-like entity or something strange in the woods, relating the story in a video that I listened to. And this person said he saw this thing and it was very large, much larger than the things that we saw. I don't know if it was a Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever, or some other sort of whatever, forest booger, whatever you want to call them. And he said he turned his flashlight on it and it disappeared as soon as he hit it with his flashlight beam. I said, oh boy, I was like, you know what? I've never heard anybody else describe that. And here's somebody saying it describing this encounter where they had that happen. So I thought that was interesting. Again, anytime, this is such a strange experience. Anytime you can get a little bit of corroboration, it helps. It makes you feel, a little bit validated, I guess. So we gathered ourselves, then we got back up. We walked to the entrance of the camp. Again, the mist was forming. The red center opened up, the portal or whatever. You could see into this rocky, barren landscape with a twisted tree. Out came the two things. They start to cautiously sort of move up to the road, kind of going side to side, stopping, looking at us, advancing a little further, stopping, sizing us up. When they got close enough, we hit them with the flashlight beams, turned off again, blinked out. This cycle went on several more times. It basically went on until dawn. And as the sunlight came up, the whole thing just disappeared. It was only visible in the night and in the dark. And somehow we had a feeling that was how it was going to be. And it was. As it was, the light started to come up, it disappeared. But I was standing there with Adam. I was literally almost out on my feet. I was just exhausted. And he said, look, the sun's almost up. He goes, it's about dawn. He said, I think this is over. He said, why don't you get some sleep? I'm going to stay up a little bit longer. He said, I'll be right over here. So my cot was like, 10 feet away. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to climb in. If you need me, I'm right here. So I went into bed, went into the cot, climbed in my sleeping bag. And I felt like I was only asleep for about maybe 10 minutes. And then I heard Adam call me. He goes, John. I was like, what? I sat up my sleeping bag. I think I got out of my sleeping bag. Maybe. I don't even know if I got out of my sleeping bag. He goes, there's a Bigfoot in the bushes over here. I'm like, yeah, really? And, so I get up and this enormous roar comes out from this bush as I'm looking over at it. I mean, really, really, really loud. And it was coming from high up. It wasn't anything that was on four legs. It was well above our heads, and it was loud, and it was, primate-ish sounding again. Or something. I don't know. I've never heard a sound quite like that. But again, we saw nothing, didn't see anything, but it emitted this just tremendous roar. And oddly, again, the other guy slept. I mean, I don't know how that didn't make him jump out of his cot. And I just, I don't know. I think I rolled over and went back to sleep, honestly. And a little while later, I heard Adam and the other guy talking, and he is saying, so I came here to look for Bigfoot. He said, I didn't sign up for this alien stuff, which is what he had said to me the night before when we were kind of taking our break there in the sitting in the folding chairs. And so I got up, and Adam kind of puttered around the camp for a bit, and Adam said, hey, John, like, let's go for a little walk. Let's take a hike up the trail. He said, I want to talk. I said, okay. And we go up the footpath at the 12 o'clock position, and it kind of climbs sort of steadily, and then it goes up some rocks, and then goes out onto another second leg of there's another part of the trail that goes further on up the ridge. And you kind of come out into the sunlight. First, you have to climb through these kind of dark, creepy woods. So I started to talk to him. He said, no, he goes, I don't want to talk here. I feel like we're being listened to. He goes, I don't like these woods. There's something really creepy in here. I said, yeah, I sense that too. And that's another thing. We both felt that right away. And he's a very well-traveled guy. Adam's been all over the world in all sorts of jungles and forests, and he doesn't really spook easily. And I don't either. I mean, I'm not as well-traveled as he is, but I like the outdoors and the forests. And and I've done a fair amount of camping, and I don't spook easily either, but this is it felt creepy in there. The whole area had like a vibe that was unsettling. And he said, let's hike up to the trail above the campsite. So we went up there, and then it sort of opened up. We were out in the sunshine. There was still very desolate and deserted, and there was a lot of bushes and trees around and nothing else. You know, it was deserted up there. But at least we were out in the sunshine, and it was more of an open area. It felt less oppressive. So we were talking, and he said, you know, we were just kind of rehashing everything that happened the night before, just to sort of understand if we were on the same page with everything. And we were. We both experienced everything and described it the same way. And I said, well, what was your impression of the creatures, these beings that we saw? What do you think of them, and of how they looked? And the first word he said was robust. He said they were very powerfully built. He goes, they were. I'm like, yeah. And it's like, even though they were short, they were very strong looking, and they were sort of animal like at the same time, humanoid. It's very, very, very disturbing, very weird. And we talked about, well, what are we going to do? I'm like, well, we can't ask them to take us back. And, you know, neither of us wanted to. A lot of people have said, well, why'd you stay? I would have left right away, you know, after that first night. I said, well, we had another night there, and we weren't supposed to leave until that Friday. And neither of us had any intention really of asking this guy to drive us back early because, you know, we were scared. I guess we were just, you know, that's not really how either of us are wired, I guess. And I felt a little bit like we would have been backing down, and if we had done that, and part of it too was such as frightening and disturbing and weird as the whole experience was. Kind of wanted to see if it was happen again. We both had a very strong feeling that it would, if we stayed that last night, that it would happen again, that we would see these things, and we sort of wanted to, just so we know it was not some sort of mass shared hallucination that the three of us had, or mostly Adam and I, but the other guy saw them too. And so we never gave any real consideration to asking the other gentleman to leave a day early and take us back. So that really wasn't anything that we gave any serious thought to. But we're like, well, how do we handle it if they come back? And like, well, I guess we'll just do the same thing we were doing and just try to fend them off and with the flashlights. And the other thing I started doing, and Adam would join me in, was besides flashing the lights at them, I thought to rebuke them in the name of Jesus Christ. I mean, I had heard of that I've heard that in terms of stopping alien abductions, that actually gets them to stop. And I have heard of that in other situations with the paranormal. If, you know, you invoke the name of the Lord, that, you know, a lot of these things are turned back by that, and by his name. So besides the flashlights, I should mention that could have been just as much or more the reason that they disappeared. Was I can't remember specifically what I said. It was something like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ, or something to that effect. But yeah, I'm sure it helped. I mean, maybe it was that and not the flashlights that made them disappear, but I think it was the lights as much as anything, maybe both. But yeah, so we resolved to stay the last night, and again, it was another beautiful day. We went out after this bizarre, crazy, scary night. We went out and we went boating on the Rogue River, and we had a wonderful time, and it's just so odd. And then at the end of the day, we went back to the old logging road, and we started climbing up the mountain on this awful road, and it was just this real sense of foreboding, and we knew we were in for it again. You could just tell. And we get up there, and it was starting to get dark. You know, it was just about dusk, and we were hanging out, Adam and I and the other guy, and his son was there, a 7-year-old son. and the boy was sitting in this great big oversized camping chair that his father had brought with him. And he was sitting next to me. The kid was kind of sat next to me a lot, and he was a nice little boy. And the guy takes out his gun, and he goes, if the bear, we saw a black bear at one point. He says, if you see the black bear, and it actually had come into camp and chewed up some stuff. And we saw the bear prints. It was very obviously the bear. That was actually the only wildlife that we even saw up there, which was, I thought, unusual for a heavy forested area. I didn't see so much as a chipmunk or a squirrel or a rabbit up there, but we did see the bear. And he goes, if you see the bear, he goes, he's showing us how to use this 44. And he goes, just shoot it, or shoot over its head, scare it off, in case the bear comes back. Because we told him, like, look, we're staying up again. And he goes, well, I'm not. I'm going to bed. He goes, so if you see the thing, here's my gun and here's how to use it. and he goes, or if you want to shoot at the other things, I guess. But you know what? I again, I had a very strong impression that if we had shot at those things, it wouldn't have done anything. I don't think it would have mattered. I never thought to fire the gun at them. I just didn't think it would do anything. So he's sitting there, he's standing there, the three of us, and he's giving us a little demo on how to, here's the safety, and here's where the bullets go. I'm like, I know enough about guns. I don't think Adam did though. But the kid is on my left. My back is to the 12 o'clock position, in front of which is one of the folding tables. And we had a couple of cases of bottled water, just like the little corrugated side, bottled water bottles. We bought water bottles just because, it was hot and, just have water. And there was an open case there, and it was mostly full, but there were a few missing from the case of water, and the plastic was ripped open. And my back was to this table where the water bottles were sitting. And all of a sudden I hear, if you ever drop the water bottle, it kind of makes a sound that you recognize. It's kind of like the plastic kind of makes a crinkling, cracking noise, and the water slushes, and you know what it sounds like. And it landed, there's a water bottle. I turned around and this water bottle was at my heels, like behind me, like somebody tossed it at me. And the little boy, the guy's son, was standing next to me, and he looked at me. He goes, that water bottle just flew off of the table all by itself at you. And I was standing 15, 20 feet in front of the table. I wasn't anywhere close to it, and the kid wasn't either, and nobody was. I mean, we were all standing kind of in the center of the circle, and the table was up by the 12 o'clock position near where the trailhead was. And this bottle flew off the table and landed at my feet, like right behind me, like right by my heels. And the kid said it flew off the table all by itself. I'm like, well, something had to have thrown it, and there wasn't anybody there. So the kid's dad said, oh, he goes, well, the Sasquatch, the forest people like to cloak, and sometimes they like to cloak and enter the camp. So he goes, they're probably just messing with you, something to that effect. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. That's fine. I was like, this stuff up here couldn't get any weirder. Now I have like floating things or things being thrown at me by invisible Sasquatches or whatever. But it just couldn't have gotten any weirder. So after the little gun demonstration, we sat in our chairs and kind of just waited for it to get a little darker before we started our usual activities, in which we were walking around the perimeter of the inside of the camping circle and calling out and trying to get a response from the forest folk, which we did. But the little boy was nervous because those black things had scared him, and the short, stocky things that we saw, the portal creatures, if you want to call them that. And we're sitting there, and the poor little kid, he grabs my hand at one point, and was holding my hand, and I was like, I hope the kid doesn't see these things again. But once again, we did our usual activities. It started to get late. Eventually, the little boy went to bed, and so did his father. Shortly after that, Adam and I stayed up as we agreed to do. And it was, again, 2:30, same exact time. We're looking down the road. There's that mist again. Starts to get brighter and brighter and brighter. Again, the red center forms. You can see through it into some sort of hellscape. I mean, it was I'm not saying it was a portal to hell, but it was pretty hellish looking. It was bathed in this reddish orange fiery glow, and it was all barren and pretty awful looking. Maybe it was Mars. I don't know. Mars is like reddish and orange, isn't it? Maybe they were Martians. I don't know what, but I don't know. They were pretty demonic looking to me, and I kind of tend to think of them as being demons, but especially that I saw them over and over as a kid. Anyway, the whole thing happened over again, precisely as it happened the night before exactly. Things came out, we rebuked them, hit them with a flashlight, they disappear. The glowing mist would wink out, including the beings. Then they would gradually get brighter and brighter and brighter. Then the orange reddish center, and out they would come again, and they would start to move up the trail, towards us. And when they got close enough, we'd zap them again. And it was over and over. It happened, I don't know, a dozen times until dawn. And, basically we just sort of fended them off because they definitely wanted to come into the campsite. They were making their way towards the road, but they were just hesitant to just come straight at us. I mean, the only time they did that was when I antagonized them the night before, which I did not do on the last night, the second night of these things appearing. I didn't yell at them or try to approach them. I think I learned my lesson there. So, but all this went on until dawn, and eventually the things faded out and disappeared when the sun came up. So, exactly as it did the previous night, except for the charging incident didn't happen. So that was the morning of I think it was Friday the 13th, actually, and a full moon. So, and that was my last day of the trip, and we packed up our gear and we drove back up to Seattle, and we thanked this gentleman who took us there for a interesting visit. And Adam and I, we met up with a friend of his who was also a Bigfoot researcher and also a doctor of psychology, as the other gentleman was. And we stayed in, he was gracious enough to allow us to sleep over at his apartment that night. And Adam and I showed up at his door, and we were pretty filthy and exhausted, and we showered and got something to eat. And we just basically, we told him of everything that happened. And he was also an ordained minister, so he gathered us in a little prayer. And the next thing I remember, I fell right to sleep on his floor. And Adam was sacked out on his couch next to me, and we both just fell asleep. And then I woke up, and he was sitting at his desk reading, and he looked over at me. He said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's like, I'm just exhausted from this experience. And I told him, I was like, I've had strange stuff happen to me my whole life. I said, I'm a little more worried about Adam, that he's not somebody that's into the paranormal stuff. He's more of a scientific researcher. This isn't really his bag. I mean, I've never had anything quite this weird happen to me, but I mean, it's sort of, in a way, par for the course in my my weird life. I mean, it's not the first time that I've had something very, very strange happen to me, but this is for Adam. I said, I hope it doesn't mess with his head too much. I mean, it's difficult to go through these experiences. So anyway, I expressed my concerns, and because he was a friend of Adam's and also a psychologist. So we chatted a bit. And then the next day, I think was it that night? I can't remember. Looked at my notes. We went out to dinner. We met up with other researcher, young lady, and we went into Seattle. We had some dinner, and the next day we went to the airport, and Adam and I said our goodbyes. He was going to spend 4 or 5 more days, I think, in the Sierra Nevada mountains with a couple of other Bigfoot researchers. And I was heading back home to New Jersey. So we said our goodbyes, and I went back home, and nothing else really unusual happened with to Adam on the remainder of his trip. And since then, I've been trying to deal with this stuff. I mean, this whole thing. I mean, it's going on 8 years, and I don't think about it every minute of every day, but I think of it probably as part of every day. In the intervening months after the incident, Adam and I would chat. We would Skype a lot, pretty regularly to talk about it, because we really only had each other to talk about this stuff, this whole incident, because you could tell other people, but nobody can really understand anything that strange. And I was very, very grateful that when I came home, my wife believed me. Nobody laughed at me, thankfully. And I needed my wife to believe me. It was important. And she's very practical, and she said, she goes, well, you shouldn't go back to that place then. I'm like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. But she believed me. And I have a handful of close friends that I've known since I was, a lot of them since high school, junior high school. I told them about it, and they believed me. They didn't make fun of me, and they didn't laugh. But what do you say to it? Most people are like, wow, really? That's pretty crazy. But you can't, it's hard to make anybody understand when haven't had those sorts of experiences in their lives, and especially something as strange as this. But I kind of felt the need to talk about it, and so I told some people, and thankfully, like as I said, nobody laughed in my face. And I remember Adam said he has a good group of buddies back in England, and he said he went out to the pub with them, and he just thought he would try to bring it up and talk about it. He said the response he got was kind of like, they're like, oh, okay, anyway, and they just changed the subject. Nobody had nobody said like, wow, that must have been a really troubling experience to go through, or some people just like, okay, moving on, and they just don't want to. Yeah, it makes them uncomfortable, or they either just flat out don't believe you, or think you're making it up, or you had some sort of you mistook what you think you saw for something mundane, or they just have no point of reference for anything so strange, so they become uncomfortable. I can't blame them. So really, just Adam and I had each other to talk about it, and we did quite a bit that year or two after it happened. And as time goes on, it becomes easier to deal with. But I think about it a lot, and I think I've changed a lot internally since then, mostly for the better. I think I started going back to church again. It wasn't really even out of a sense of like, boy, I had this horrifying experience. Maybe it's a sign that I should. It wasn't even anything like a decision I made. It was almost just something that, like a switch that flipped inside of me. It's hard to describe, but I started to read a lot about the Catholic Church's teachings on demonology, exorcism, and spiritual warfare, and started listening to a lot of videos, read several books. I was even in correspondence with an exorcist, and a lot of the stuff that the church teaches. Now, I'm Catholic, and and I never hear this kind of stuff in church. They just don't talk about it. I mean, I think maybe prior to Vatican II, they did a little bit more of the fire and brimstone stuff, but there is a lot of overlap between the church's teachings and this stuff that we call the paranormal. And I tell you what, I was a guy that I would bristle at any kind of suggestion that there was anything spiritual or religious with anything paranormal. I hated it when people brought that up. Like, oh yeah, you're typical religious guy. Everything is angels and demons and God and the devil. But you know what? These things that I saw in the forest were the same things that I saw as a child. I mean, make sense of that, unless they are some sort of demonic entities that are in some way attached to me. That is the unfortunate conclusion I've come up with, and I don't like it. I don't like thinking that, but I don't have another explanation for it because they were the same things I saw as a child. And there's a lot of stuff that is a lot of overlap between what the church teaches about this stuff and this subject of the demonic and what we kind of lump under the umbrella of the paranormal. And I know a lot of people don't like that. And I was the same way. I really didn't like it when people made that suggestion, but there is. Look into it. I spent a few years reading everything I could about the subject, and I've consulted with, and there's definitely some gaps between what the church teaches and the Catholic Church teaches and some of this stuff, some of these reports that we hear as far as these entities. And I don't know if they have any position really on these seemingly physical entities that people report seeing, but I don't know. I'm reluctant to say all of this is evil and demonic or and it's of the devil. I'm hesitant to fully go down that road, but I think that's part of it. And I think there is a danger in going out into the woods and trying to communicate with something we don't really understand. We don't really know what it is that we're trying to communicate with. I think that is potentially dangerous. The Bible warns explicitly against not consulting with spiritual mediums, trying not to try to speak to spirits and indulge in occult practices. Going out and trying to communicate with something you don't understand. We don't understand what it is. You might have our preconceived ideas, but we don't really know what we're talking to. Something might answer, might be something mimicking something else. Anyway, that's kind of where I am with all this. And I'm going to continue to write about this on my blog. Again, if you want to read. Actually, I wrote this all out in a 6-part series of articles. Again, my blog is paranormalist.com. It's not it's just paranormalist.com. And so I wrote all my thoughts on there and some of my other experiences. So feel free to check that out if you like. And thank you, Vic. I appreciate you having me on the show.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.